In the late 1970s, archaeologists unearthed pottery shards from Kuntillet Ajrud deep in the Sinai. Inscribed on these 8th century BCE shards were blessings invoking Yahweh and his Asherah. This inscription ignited scholarly debate. The Hebrew Bible, as we know it, portrays Yahweh as a solitary God, tolerating no rivals, certainly no consort. So who was this Asherah mentioned alongside Israel's God? Was she a goddess, a cult symbol? And critically, if such inscriptions existed, why is she so conspicuously absent or sometimes demonized within the Bible itself? This video explores the fascinating, often hidden story of Asherah, a figure some scholars argue was deliberately erased from ancient Israelite religion, examining evidence for her presence and eventual disappearance. Before we dive into the archaeological record and biblical text, I'm curious, what was the first time you heard about Asherah, or perhaps did you only learn about her existence recently? Share your experiences in the comments below. It helps us understand the different perspectives people bring to this complex history. The Hebrew word Asherah, Asherah, appears over 40 times in the Bible. Many English translations render it as sacred pole or cultic tree, reflecting a theological choice to smooth over discomfort. Yet the Bible itself condemns its presence. Deuteronomy commands, "You shall not plant any tree as an Asherah beside the altar of Yahweh your God." This phrasing suggests deliberate worship, not just an object. Prophets, too, rail against it. Jeremiah laments the Queen of Heaven, a title scholars connect to Asherah. But was this Asherah merely an object or something more? In 2 Kings 23, King Josiah's reforms included removing all the articles made for Baal and Asherah from the temple. He had the Asherah, which stood in the house of Yahweh, brought out and burned, grinding it to dust, scattering its ashes. Such deliberate destruction aims to annihilate its memory. What kind of object elicits this violent purge? Was biblical condemnation of Asherah just an attack on an idolatrous symbol, or a deliberate attempt to suppress a powerful female deity who once stood alongside Israel's God? To answer that, we must step outside the biblical narrative. To understand Asherah's true identity, we first meet her in Canaan, predating Israel. Imagine Ugarit around 1400 BCE, where scribes etched myths onto clay tablets, the Ugaritic texts. Here we encounter Athirat, or Asherah, mother of the gods, powerful consort of El, the supreme creator deity of the Canaanite pantheon. She's depicted as wise, fertile, sometimes with 70 divine children. Her epithets include progenitress of the gods and lady of the sea. Her power was undeniable, her influence vast. She embodied fertility and life. When Israelites emerged, they were part of this Canaanite religious landscape. Their earliest practices would have absorbed elements from neighbors. A prominent goddess like Asherah, consort of chief god El, which in Hebrew El means God, would have left an indelible mark. So, if she was so prominent among Canaanites, how did she transition into Israelite religious life? And what form did that take? Was it simple adoption or something more complex? Archaeologists have brought Asherah into sharper focus. The Kuntillet Ajrud inscriptions are not anomalies. From Kuntillet Ajrud, a remote Sinai site, 9th to 8th centuries BCE, 2 large storage jars bore inscriptions. One, "I bless you by Yahweh of Taman and his Asherah." The other, "I bless you by Yahweh of Samaria and his Asherah." Revolutionary is the direct linguistic coupling, Yahweh and his Asherah, Yahweh va'asherato. The possessive suffix his attached to va'asherato strongly suggests a divine entity, a consort, not merely a sacred pole. This is a partner. Equally compelling is Khirbet el-Kom, a Judean foothills burial cave 8th century BCE.
Blessed be Uriahu by Yahweh and by his Asherah, again his Asherah. These contemporaneous records from different sites point to common religious practice. Imagery on one Kuntillet Ajrud jar depicts two figures interpreted as a male and female deity side by side, sometimes with cow-like features, a motif for fertility goddesses. This visually supports Asherah as a distinct divine figure. These discoveries reveal a popular Israelite and Judean religious practice where Yahweh was not worshipped alone. He had a companion, a divine consort, Asherah. This was prevalent even within royal circles. Archaeological evidence paints Asherah as a recognized divine entity, even his Asherah. But how deep did this belief run? The Bible, despite attempts to suppress her, reveals Asherah's presence in the Jerusalem temple. King Manasseh of Judah, in 2 Kings 21, portrayed as wicked, made an Asherah and set up the carved image of Asherah that he had made in the house of Yahweh. An image of Asherah stood prominently within the temple, sanctioned by the king, implying profound religious syncretism until King Josiah's reforms. This isn't isolated. Prophet Jeremiah, in Jeremiah 44, condemns Judeans for their devotion to the Queen of Heaven. Women declare, "We will certainly do whatsoever thing goes forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven, as we have done, we and our fathers, our kings, and our princes. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well." This is deeply entrenched, widespread, and generational. The people explicitly state this worship brought prosperity, contradicting the Deuteronomistic stance. The biblical text captures the raw voice of common people, contrasting the official narrative. Scholarly consensus links this Queen of Heaven to Asherah, particularly as a fertility goddess. This cult seems popular among women, representing feminine power and protection. Jeremiah's denunciations underscore the difficulty reformers faced. It was a battle against ingrained cultural practices. The stubborn resistance shows how pervasive Asherah worship, under whatever manifestation, truly was. The stakes for reformers were existential. Asherah's eradication links to powerful religious reformers championing exclusive Yahweh worship. King Josiah, late 7th century BCE, led perhaps the most vigorous religious purge in Judah's history. Josiah's reforms, in 2 Kings 23, were comprehensive. He removed the Asherah from the temple, burned it, and systematically destroyed polytheistic worship throughout Judah. He tore down high places, defiled cult sites. His actions were driven by a book of the law, likely early Deuteronomy, demanding singular loyalty to Yahweh. This wasn't just a move towards monotheism, the belief in only one God. Israelite religion was primarily monolatrous, worship of one God without denying others' existence. But Josiah's reforms pushed for absolute monotheism, or at least a strict monolatry tolerating no other divine figures, certainly no consort. The Deuteronomistic ideology viewed deviation from exclusive Yahwehism as grave sin. These reformers believed calamities, like exiles, were divine punishment for syncretism. For national survival, pure, exclusive Yahweh worship was paramount. Eliminating Asherah and Baal was a national imperative. But how does one erase a goddess so embedded? It's not just smashing idols, it's rewriting history, reinterpreting traditions, and reshaping collective memory. Reformers didn't just physically remove Asherah, they removed her from the story. The compilation and editing of much of the Hebrew Bible's historical books, Deuteronomy through 2 Kings, is known as the Deuteronomistic history. This literary framework provided powerful narrative control. This project explained Israel's past through strict Yahwehistic theology, prosperity from obedience, disaster from disobedience. The biblical text captures the raw voice of common people, contrasting the official narrative. Scholarly consensus links this Queen of Heaven to Asherah, particularly as a fertility goddess. This cult seems popular among women, representing feminine power and protection. Jeremiah's denunciations underscore the difficulty reformers faced. It was a battle against ingrained cultural practices. The stubborn resistance shows how pervasive Asherah worship, under whatever manifestation, truly was. The stakes for reformers were existential. Asherah's eradication links to powerful religious reformers championing exclusive Yahweh worship. King Josiah, late 7th century BCE, led perhaps the most vigorous religious purge in Judah's history. Josiah's reforms, in 2 Kings 23, were comprehensive. He removed the Asherah from the temple, burned it, and systematically destroyed polytheistic worship throughout Judah. He tore down high places, defiled cult sites. His actions were driven by a book of the law, likely early Deuteronomy, demanding singular loyalty to Yahweh. This wasn't just a move towards monotheism, the belief in only one God. Israelite religion was primarily monolatrous, worship of one God without denying others' existence. But Josiah's reforms pushed for absolute monotheism, or at least a strict monolatry tolerating no other divine figures, certainly no consort. The Deuteronomistic ideology viewed deviation from exclusive Yahwehism as grave sin. These reformers believed calamities like exiles were divine punishment for syncretism. For national survival, pure exclusive Yahweh worship was paramount. Eliminating Asherah and Baal was a national imperative. But how does one erase a goddess so embedded? It's not just smashing idols. It's rewriting history, reinterpreting traditions, and reshaping collective memory. Reformers didn't just physically remove Asherah, they removed her from the story. The compilation and editing of much of the Hebrew Bible's historical books, Deuteronomy through 2 Kings, is known as the Deuteronomistic history. This literary framework provided powerful narrative control. This project explained Israel's past through strict Yahwehistic theology, prosperity from obedience, disaster from disobedience.
Asherah and other deities became symbols of Israel's apostasy, reasons for their downfall. Her presence became the ultimate transgression. Editors faced a challenge: how to deal with Asherah worship, even in the temple. Their solution: condemn it, attribute it to wicked kings, and portray it as deviation from pure Yahwehism. They framed these acts as abominations deserving divine wrath. By consistently associating Asherah with sin, they gradually diminished her status from powerful goddess to mere cult object, a sacred pole to be destroyed. This editorial strategy is evident in modern Bible translations. Rendering Asherah as an inanimate object perpetuates the Deuteronomistic erasure, smoothing over textual discomfort. This is a powerful example of how history can be shaped. The Deuteronomistic authors crafted a theological narrative, a lesson for future generations. In that lesson, no room existed for Yahweh's Asherah. Even after efforts to suppress Asherah's cult and memory, linguistic clues in Hebrew suggest prior prominence. Language preserves layers of history. The Hebrew word Asherah is a puzzle. In many biblical contexts, it refers to a wooden pole or cult object. This shift from divine name to cultic item is telling. It reduces a goddess to her emblem, effectively demoting her. Imagine if the cross became just an abstract symbol, its origin representing Jesus forgotten. Scholars debate if biblical authors always meant Asherah as an object or if earlier texts referred to the goddess. The shift might be a deliberate Deuteronomistic strategy to minimize her divine status without denying historical existence. Reducing a goddess to a sacred tree wins a theological battle. Furthermore, some argue the Hebrew plural asherim, often translated as multiple cultic poles, might hint at the proliferation of Asherah's worship, implying local shrines had their own Asherah or various manifestations. The word Asherah is a linguistic battlefield: proper noun, goddess, or common noun, object. The biblical text, through language and translation, often pushes for the latter, reinforcing a singular Yahweh. But for those attuned to Canaanite echoes and archaeology, the prior divine meaning resonates.
What does this linguistic suppression mean for understanding the divine in ancient Israel? Asherah's systematic removal from the Israelite religious narrative had profound implications for the feminine aspect of the divine. Many ancient Near Eastern cultures balanced male and female deities, embodying complementary aspects. With Asherah's departure, Yahweh stood alone. While the Bible uses rich metaphors for God, father, mother hen, the explicit divine feminine presence was effectively removed. This absence might explain developments in later Judaism. The concept of Hakma, or wisdom in Proverbs, is personified as female, acting alongside God in creation. "The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works," wisdom declares. Not a goddess, but personified wisdom fills a conceptual space, echoing a divine female role. Similarly, later mystical traditions like Kabbalah developed the Shekinah, the indwelling feminine presence of God. Though much later and distinct, its emergence might reflect a deep-seated human need to experience the divine in both masculine and feminine forms. The persistent search for balance, even within strict monotheism, suggests Asherah's erasure left a void. Her story is not just about a forgotten goddess. It's about the profound impact of her absence on religious imagination and on the evolving understanding of the divine. Did her suppression contribute to a more patriarchal religious structure, or was it a symptom? Among the most direct biblical references to a persistent female deity, if not explicitly Asherah, is the Queen of Heaven. Prophet Jeremiah, before the Babylonian exile, fiercely condemns Judeans for their devotion.
In Jeremiah 7:44, he describes women making cakes and pouring libations involving children and husbands. Their conviction, "We will certainly do whatsoever thing goes forth out of our own mouth, to burn incense unto the Queen of Heaven. For then had we plenty of victuals, and were well." This is deeply entrenched, widespread, generational. The people explicitly state this worship brought prosperity, directly contradicting the Deuteronomistic stance. The biblical text captures the raw voice of common people, contrasting the official narrative. Scholarly consensus links this Queen of Heaven to Asherah, particularly as a fertility goddess. The cult seems popular among women, representing feminine power and protection. Jeremiah's denunciations underscore the difficulty reformers faced. It was a battle against ingrained cultural practices. The stubborn resistance shows how pervasive Asherah worship, under whatever manifestation, truly was. The stakes for reformers were existential. Beyond theology, Asherah's eradication had significant geopolitical and social motivations. The shift towards exclusive Yahwism was not just spiritual purity. It was about national identity and political consolidation. During the monarchy, Israel and Judah existed in empire's shadows. A strong, unified identity was crucial. Syncretistic practices, where Yahweh was worshipped alongside Baal and Asherah, blurred Israelite identity with Canaanite neighbors, threatening cohesion. An exclusive covenant with Yahweh provided a powerful ideological foundation for a nascent nation-state. A singular God demanded singular loyalty, translating into greater political unity. Eliminating rival deities was a strategic act of nation-building. Moreover, suppressing powerful female deities might reflect broader social changes. As Israelite society became more centralized and patriarchal, women's public religious roles may have diminished. Shifting from a diverse pantheon with goddesses to a singular male deity mirrored and reinforced these evolving social structures. An exclusively masculine divine realm would naturally validate human social hierarchy. So, Asherah's erasure wasn't a simple religious shift. It was a multifaceted project, theological, political, social, aimed at forging a new, distinct, resilient Israelite identity. This project, successful in shaping the biblical narrative, came at the cost of erasing a significant part of their ancient religious heritage.
To truly appreciate Asherah's fate in Israel, we glance at neighboring cultures. Were divine consorts common? How did other societies balance primary gods and goddesses? In Mesopotamia, deities like Ishtar and Inanna were powerful. In Egypt, goddesses like Isis and Hathor stood alongside male deities, fundamental to cosmologies. Osiris had Isis, Ra had Hathor. These divine couples were cornerstones, requiring both male and female principles for balance. Even in Canaan, Ugaritic texts show supreme god El had Asherah as consort. Baal had Enough. A powerful male deity having a female counterpart was a cornerstone of religious thought. The Israelite move towards exclusive Yahwism was a significant departure. While other cultures elevated one deity, they rarely systematically eradicated an entire category, especially a primary consort. This radical shift speaks volumes about the ideological force behind the Yahwist reformers. They actively challenged and dismantled a deeply entrenched religious worldview. This comparison shows Asherah's erasure wasn't a gradual fading. It was a conscious, deliberate, successful theological revolution. What does this mean for our understanding of ancient Israelite religion? Was it always intended to be monotheistic, or did it evolve through struggle? Our modern understanding of religion often implies exclusive loyalty. But for ancient Israel, religion was fluid and syncretistic. This blending was the norm. Imagine an ancient Judah farmer seeking a good harvest.
He might pray to Yahweh for rain, but also invoke Asherah, the fertility goddess. For him, these weren't contradictory. Deities had different domains. It was pragmatic. Kuntillet Ajrud and Kirbet el-Kam suggest this. Blessings invoking Yahweh and his Asherah aren't confused faith. They represent natural, integrated religious practice with deep roots. The Yahwist reformers shattered this fluidity. They introduced exclusive worship. Loyalty to Yahweh demanded absolute rejection of other deities. This was a radical innovation, reshaping understanding of the divine. It created a stark dichotomy, Yahweh or Asherah, not Yahweh and Asherah. This struggle between syncretistic popular practice and exclusive Yahwistic theology defined much of Israel's religious history. The Bible, a product of the victorious Yahwistic party, presents this as a battle between good and evil. But a nuanced historical perspective reveals a vibrant, contradictory religious landscape where Asherah held a significant, though suppressed, place. What is the ultimate consequence of this process? The title promises to explain why Asherah was erased from the Bible. But that erasure is complex, going beyond simple deletion. It wasn't just physical removal, it was systematic transformation of her identity and diminishment of her memory. Was Asherah erased as a goddess? Yes. The biblical narrative presents Yahweh as singular, tolerating no rivals. Any hint of Asherah as a co-equal divine entity was pruned. Was she erased as a symbol? This is key. The Hebrew word Asherah persists, but its meaning shifts to an inanimate cult object, a pole or a tree. This redefinition is a form of erasure. Reducing her from divine person to mere idol stripped her power. She became an object of condemnation. And was her memory erased? This is most enduring. For centuries, the dominant narrative rendered Asherah invisible to most Bible readers. Her name was interpreted to support exclusive monotheism. 20th century archaeological discoveries were shocking precisely because they unearthed a memory buried for millennia, bringing back a goddess systematically removed from sacred texts. This erasure wasn't sudden. It was gradual, deliberate, sustained across centuries of reform and editing. It speaks to the power of those shaping religious narratives. Asherah's erasure was a triumph of a specific theological agenda, but unearthed evidence allows a richer, more complex history of Israelite religion. Despite evidence from archaeology and textual analysis, Asherah's story remains a vibrant, contested area of scholarly debate.
No single interpretation is universally accepted. Some scholars acknowledge archaeological evidence, but argue his Asherah might refer to a cultic symbol associated with Yahweh, not a full divine consort. They suggest Israelite assimilation integrated a local sacred symbol, perhaps for fertility rites. Others emphasize continuity with Canaanite religion, asserting evidence strongly points to Asherah as a goddess, a divine partner to Yahweh, at least in popular religion. They highlight the possessive pronoun his against the sacred pole interpretation. Debate often centers on the theological weight of the pronoun and iconography. There's also discussion on the extent and timing of the erasure. Was it gradual, or were there intense reform periods like Josiah's? How widespread was her worship, universal or regional? These questions fuel academic inquiry, reminding us that ancient history is rarely settled. Scholarly conversation demonstrates the complexity of reconstructing ancient religious life. It requires meticulous examination of fragmented texts, biased narratives, and ambiguous archaeological finds. There are no easy answers, only careful interpretations. But Asherah was far more significant in ancient Israelite religion than the canonical Bible implies. Her story challenges many conventional assumptions.
So, what can we definitively conclude about Asherah, the goddess erased from the Bible? With confidence, we can say archaeological discoveries, particularly the inscriptions from Kuntillet Ajrud and Khirbet el-Qum, provide compelling evidence that Asherah was a recognized divine entity, explicitly associated with Yahweh in popular Israelite religion during the monarchic period. The phrasing Yahweh and his Asherah strongly suggests a divine consort or partner, not merely an inanimate object. We also know her worship was deeply entrenched, even reaching the Jerusalem temple under kings like Manasseh, and persisted among common people as the Queen of Heaven. The biblical text itself, through condemnation and efforts to redefine her as a sacred pole, inadvertently confirms her widespread presence. The compilation and editing of the Hebrew Bible, particularly the Deuteronomistic history, reflects a deliberate theological project to promote exclusive Yahwehism and systematically diminish or erase the memory of Asherah as a goddess. This was driven by theological, political, and social motivations to forge a distinct Israelite identity. What remains less certain, however, is the precise nature of her relationship with Yahweh in every context. Was she universally understood as a full consort equal in status, or did her role vary regionally and chronologically? How much of her original Canaanite mythology was fully absorbed into Israelite belief? These are questions where the evidence becomes more fragmented, inviting nuanced interpretations and ongoing scholarly debate. Ultimately, the story of Asherah is a powerful reminder that the Bible, while divinely inspired for many, is also a product of human hands, shaped by historical forces, theological agendas, and centuries of editing. It reveals a more complex, often messier, picture of ancient Israelite religion than the tidy monotheistic narrative we often encounter. Unearthing Asherah's story allows us to understand not only who she was, but also the profound transformation that shaped the very foundations of Judaism and Christianity, leading to the singular, solitary God we recognize today. Her erasure speaks volumes about the choices made and the beliefs abandoned on the path to monotheism.